Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I wanted to do another in the series of Mr. Edison and his marginalia, and talking about music. Now, Edison fancied himself quite a master of understanding music. He considered himself quite a master of understanding the voice. He considered himself quite a master of understanding many of the aspects of the music industry. And also the fact that he felt that he understood who was a good composer, who was a bad composer, why critics disliked the stuff that he thought was wonderful. And so I want to share some stuff that probably has not seen many publications, if any. And it's Edison at home, Edison writing, and Edison writing for his own basic pleasure because it's his own books. It's different. I found it kind of fascinating when you look at the stuff that he wrote in a lot of times, like in his laboratory and stuff. It was somewhat measured, but he would also sometimes really go on a tangent when he was at home and writing in his books. So let's talk about music. And I wanted to share some stuff. A lot of this is from several books. One was the Grove's Dictionary of Music, which was a massive series of volumes. And Edison would go through and he would just go to town on many of the comments in the book, on many of the artists and many of the subjects, as I've already mentioned with pitch. He talked about pitch, saying that when you're very young, you like high pitch. When you're 25 years of age or so, you like present French pitch. And then when you get older, your cordy rods get clogged, and you like deep pitch, and you like to play your record slower. And as I mentioned, the Edison Diamond Disc, that was the one that Edison used in his home, played slow. And obviously at Edison's desire. But that's neither here nor there. Let's take a look at what we have to say about music. And so let's start off with Mr. Brahms. And Edison called him a musical mechanic. And he writes also that the music of Brahms, as it was stated in Grove's Dictionary of Music, the music of Brahms is often better than it sounds. And Edison writes about this, of course, as you can imagine. He said, "This is the limit. Noise would probably be the best music of all. Then educated critics could straighten out the discordance and defy the crowd." Oh, there was a fella who wrote, "What is absolute music? It is the music that nobody likes but music critics." That's what Edison said. He said that James Huckner, who was a critic, "This man has a sour grape personality." He wrote of another critic by the name of Edward Hanslick. And here comes the curse of music, another critic, biased to melody and lover of discord. Of course, I've told you about Tchaikovsky already. He said, "How could music come from such a crank?" And of course, music melody. Now, this is an interesting thing. And it makes you wonder sometimes what he was thinking. Or if perhaps sometimes when he wrote this stuff, he had been working in the lab and breathed in a little too many chemicals. Because he writes here, he says, "We have Slavs, Chinese, Japs, Greeks here at the laboratory. They all on a test pick out the same fine melody. Every American is made the same way, and all like the same kind of music, and dislike music such as critics' music. Now, there's some really interesting things here, and maybe we should dissect this a little bit. Because what he's saying is that we all walk in lockstep when it comes to music. Which, if you think about it, I think is the furthest thing from the truth. I mean, music is very much like literature. Some people like this kind of literature, some people like others. Some people like detective novels, some people like biographies. We all have different likes and wants and enjoyments when it comes to music. But Edison didn't quite see it that way. We're all the same, and we all like the same kind of music. And even in the advertising, it would say, you're playing an Edison record, and everyone loves it. So open your windows, let people hear it. Let's go on. And he was reading by Huckner, another, that same critic, Chopin's F-sharp minor polonaise. And Huckner says, to me, the piece far surpasses in grandeur all of Chopin's polonaises, even the heroic, with its thunderous cannon and rattling of horses' hoofs. It may be morbid, but it is also magnificent. And Edison replies, Huckner would say, what could sound more grand than a gigantic truck loaded with 10 tons of I-beams, drawn by 10 pairs of Pincherians, rumbling over the cobblestones of Avenue B? As we continue, just a little jump from music for a second. He did read a book on Napoleon. He read several books on Napoleon, but it was interesting what he wrote, and I wrote this down real quick. And as I said, I didn't write down everything. I just wrote down a few things here and there. Napoleon and ego gigantique. There must have been a streak of madness in this man. Must have been a streak of insanity in this man. He's a mad dog, a poor loser, crazy. Well, that's the verdict on Napoleon, which is fine. And then Edison writes down as an aside here, the song, Yes, We Have No Bananas. And Edison writes, contains no melody whatsoever. Interesting thing, not doing with Edison, but there was a court case over that song, saying it was using melodies from other songs, and they actually found that I think there was like a whole load of different songs that fit within it from the Hallelujah chorus onward. Let us go on. He saw a quote in a music book that said, every German is a music lover. And Edison said, no, Germans are not musical. Their custom of having every child of a family learn a different instrument produces this fiction. TAE. I don't get that. Probably better that way. He had a thing about Germans. Well, World War I, he was very anti-Prussian anyway, because a lot of the stuff he said pertained to Prussians and Germans and the like. And I can't pronounce this, and I think he's kind of playing a little bit here. I think this is another day that maybe he got too many vapors from the chemicals and decided to do some writing. When he talked about German, and the German phrase is aber Aberbaste, Grafen, Wissen, Sir, Nicht, Das, Der, Meister, Trinket, Der, and he goes on and on and on, all kinds of different words. I don't know if any of them are correct. I don't speak German, so I'm just having a little fun with it. But Edison wrote after writing all of these crazy little things. He said, hold a glass in front of your face and say this in German. 800 droplets of spit will, will therefore be deposited. Okay, it's just kind of different. What can I say? And then we'll talk about Chopin a little bit. The worst thing Chopin ever composed, Edison says, was better than anything in Don Giovanni. The funeral march is grand. The funeral march of Beethoven is also good, when played on a violin with a viola to take the very low notes. And then he happened to get to something about Mozart's Don Giovanni, which said, the unequaled and immortal masterpiece. And here Edison kind of opens up a little bit. Sometimes he was questioning himself and trying to figure out why he thought the way he thought. And he says here, to me, it's the opposite of this. I wonder what is wrong in my ear. Interesting. So he's questioning the thought of why, when he listens to it, he thinks it's absolutely dreadful, but he's reading all these people telling how great it is. Well, what can I say? There's other things that are kind of interesting with Edison and music, of course. When he talks about musical performance and singers and whatever, he gets into some very interesting stuff, and I wanted to move up here a little bit because there's a lot of stuff with a lot of great thinkers, performers, philosophers, and all kinds of stuff that Edison has remarks on, which I'm going to do in future talks here as I go through all this stuff. Now, what did he say here? George Frederick Handel. How German-like. Funny any real music came from such a man. Gluck. Gluck's music is in contrast to the laws of acoustics and physiology. Gluck and Mozart are birds of a feather. They have to learn this is not music. That's what he wrote. Now, what is wrong with his ear? Now, granted, we know he couldn't hear well. But he was listening to lots of other music and saying, this is magnificent. And there's lots of things where he listens to these secondary composers and music that's not the best. And he said, this is the real stuff. He also was really into tango music. He said, these are great, get more. And even other times I have found that he would write down saying, how do you dance to this? And one kind of gets the image of Edison alone in his room, in his big library at Glenmont, the main living room, in his bunny slippers, trying to figure out how to dance to certain music. It'd be kind of interesting, who's to say he didn't? It sounds like kind of a fun thing because I think occasionally he would get a little crazy and funny. He liked to dance, especially when he was young. So I kind of have an image of Edison saying, "How do you dance to this?" And he was listening to some music that was like Charleston-like, and he said, "How do you dance to this?" And another time he complained upon listening to a record, and he said, "There's so much bass in this record that the phonograph dances all over the floor." Interesting stuff, but think about this stuff with Gluck and Mozart. This isn't music. What was he inhaling? Now, even if you don't appreciate it or like it, you know there's some beautiful melodies in Mozart, and and he was fond of little nursery rhymes. I mean, Mary had a little lamb, twinkle, twinkle, little star, that kind of stuff. Oh, well, what can I say? That's the way he felt. Another thing here, excuse me, Beethoven. He escaped being a Prussian. His music, his operas, found 3 that were good. There was some music. 1 not so good. As heard on the piano. This is real stuff. That's the way he put it here. And he talked about an interesting thing he talked about with Beethoven when he conducted his Ninth Symphony and he was totally deaf. Edison said he should have put his fingers on the drum and then felt the rhythm of the vibration of the orchestra. Now we come to Rossini. Practical man. Common sense made natural man's music. A genius wrote real music. Only a few inspired, but even the composed music is generally musical. Take that. Let us continue. Berlioz have not yet found any inspired music. Franz Liszt, a musical mathematical genius. He really liked Liszt. Othello by Verdi and Falstaff by Verdi. Neither of these have any melodies. Verdi tried to imitate Wagner. No good. I want to mention a few more things as we go to the second one, and then we can go through lots of other stuff, especially dealing with various points in the economy and other stuff. Beethoven, he mentions as well, he never used TNT music. That's very good to know. Schubert. It mentions something about Schubert here that Schubert never had the opportunity of not getting a great musical education. And Edison wrote, he struck luck in not getting this damned education. German singing clubs. Only a foreman in a boiler yard could stand it. Funiculi funicula. No good. It'll go on here. Let's see if I can decipher this. It almost seems when an educated man has degeneration of the inner ear, he becomes a musical critic and commences to love discord. Ernestine Schumann-Heink, divorced again, 1915. Okay. Now, let's talk about singers. 98% of all singers trial on the phonograph have tremolo. And the strange thing is that they are amazed and unaware of it and are always astonished when they hear it in the record of their voice. Hence, it is not under brain control. The rate varies from 3 to 12 per second. Some only have it on one note. Some have it on high and some on every note. The effect is at times very disagreeable. Singers who have become very popular in most cases have but little tremolo. Now here is Dr. Edison with his cure. And this is one of my favorites, vibrato. A glass of cold water will generally stop it in sopranos for 3 to 4 minutes. Bach, his head was level. The Stroh violin, no good. I agree. Discord, no good except to the German brain, where discord is resolved into melody. And one last thing to mention to you. A few more things real quick. Liszt's genius was interpretation and not creation. And he writes, the tremolo of the voice is unpleasant, and to me it is. Luigi Arditi, get all of his published music. He is a star. Let's just, I'm sure there's a lot more which I should do, but I'll just wait on this. I think I've done quite a bit here. I've talked quite a bit. But in closing, it's an interesting thing to look at what he thought was music, how he understood music. And he had some very, very unusual ideas about music. He was very, in many respects, unmusical. But he thought he was musical. I always remember reading of a violinist, and I can't think of his name at the moment, who went to Edison one day and took his violin, and he just went, and Edison said, wonderful. And he said at that point he realized, that Edison really didn't have any kind of an ear for music. And, we question, what did he hear? Obviously, he heard a lot of music, in his last few years of life. He would start biting into phonographs. He did it occasionally earlier, but that became common practice because he couldn't hear a doggone thing in those days. But, he would sit down and put his head next to a piano and do all kinds of stuff like that so he could hear. And sometimes he would have people with him. I remember he was going through some records and says, tune rotten, but hold, wife likes it. So, even Edison had to listen to his wife every now and then because she told him that's a good song. And, well, I think I've said enough. Thank you.